Hello everyone. Tonight we're walking slowly down a rain-slick street where every stone beneath your feet is older than the oldest story in your family. They're not here by accident. Centuries ago, people bent their backs and laid them one by one, turning a path into a diary. Smooth patches mark where thousands of feet, wheels, and hooves passed. You pause at a darker stone, hearing the tale that a merchant once tripped here in 1374, spilling a chest of silver and causing a miniature riot. Whether it's true or not, the city keeps its secrets. You move under the shadow of damp eaves, catching the warm scent of bread mixed with wood smoke. In the Middle Ages, this was the soundtrack of daily life, the clop of hooves, the creak of wooden wheels, the quick bark of a fish seller, or, oddly enough, someone shouting about a goat gone missing. Historians still debate whether cobblestones were simply practical or a deliberate civic boast. Our city can afford beauty underfoot. The street narrows suddenly, like a secret passage. This wasn't for charm, it was a defense trick. Guards could block strangers more easily while attackers slowed and lost their sense of direction. You squeeze through, hand brushing cool stone, hearing water drip from the roof tiles. Overhead, a cat lounges on a ledge, its eyes saying, "Centuries have passed, and you still walk funny." At your feet runs a drainage channel, still doing its job after hundreds of years. Back then, it carried rainwater, spilled beer, and the occasional fish escaping from a tipped barrel. You imagine a soaked apprentice chasing one down the street to save his master's lunch. You stop at a round paving stone set in the middle of the lane, a famous meeting point in olden days. "Meet me at the stone" was all you had to say. People waited here to trade news, pass messages, or just watch life shuffle by. The rain starts again, a soft patter that makes the stones glow. Water threads into the grooves, flowing exactly as it has for centuries. And you, just another pair of feet in the city's long parade, leave your own faint mark on the street's endless memory. You step off the cobblestones and drift into the market square just before dawn, when the city is still half asleep and the air tastes faintly of damp wood and yesterday's cinnamon. Stalls hunch like folded umbrellas, canvas drooping, ropes slack. Chalk rings mark where each vendor will soon claim their patch. Somewhere, a stray dog noses a basket, then retreats with the guilty look of one who remembers the baker's broom. A single chapel bell rings, clear, small, and official. In medieval towns, a bell marked the legal start of the market. Trade before that could mean a fine or worse, a lecture from a very stern guild elder. A shutter slides open, a barrel rolls over cobbles, a sleepy fountain sputters to life. You pause in the square's center, letting imagination fill the silence. Soon there will be honey jars glowing like afternoon tea, fish laid out silver as coins, herbs tied in bundles still damp from the fields. A boy rehearses his sales cry, "Fresh rolls!" Warm as your hands, and cracks his voice in the attempt. He tries again. Better. The first stall creaks open. A baker dusts flour from a board, stretches an awning, and suddenly the square is waking. Voices layer. Soft bargaining, laughter over a lucky price, the sharp call of a chicken who seems deeply involved in commerce. A city official strolls by with a set of standard weights, checking scales. The law demanded fairness, especially for bread and ale. He weighs salt, nods solemnly, and moves on like a man who has personally secured the fate of civilization. At the spice table, you breathe in pepper sharp as gossip, cloves warm as a memory, saffron whispering of distant wealth. Historians still debate whether pepper became an unofficial currency or was just an extravagant obsession, but here it feels priceless. Nearby, fabric merchants smooth wool that sighs, silk that glides, linen that squeaks faintly when you fold it. You linger by the cheese cart. The vendor offers a wedge with a knowing smile. It smells like a cave has learned to write poetry. She tells you the cow's name, Marguerite, and throws in a crumble for luck. In market language, that means she likes your face. Closer to the fountain, a scribe sets up his desk, ready to write letters for those who can't. The market isn't just goods, it's news, matchmaking, rumor exchange. A single whisper here can grow into 3 ships, a sea serpent, and a marriage proposal before noon. As the day warms, the air thickens with roasted chestnuts, sizzling onions, and apples sweetening in the sun. Deals close with firm handshakes. A child sleeps curled in a basket of clean wool. You turn once, slowly, to take it in, the stalls clustered like friends, the market cross pretending not to eavesdrop. Tomorrow it will be empty again, but for now, it's the living, beating heart of the city. You step away with bread under your arm, a rumor in your pocket, and the warmth of a square that has held more stories than any book ever will. You leave the market square and follow a narrow street to a building that looms like a wooden giant, the old Guildhall. Its beams are black with age, its windows blink with tiny panes of glass, and the carved doors seem to know who's worthy to enter. You push one open, the hinges sighing as though they've heard this story too many times. Inside, the air smells of polished oak, beeswax, and a faint echo of ink and smoke. Long tables stretch down the hall, each with benches worn shiny by generations of craftsmen. You imagine them sitting here, tailors with needles tucked behind their ears, bakers dusted in flour, carpenters carrying the scent of sawdust like a badge. Guilds were more than work clubs. They controlled training, quality, prices, and sometimes politics. In this city, if you wanted to sell shoes, you didn't just make shoes. You joined the Shoemakers Guild, learned their secrets, and swore their oaths. On one wall hangs a painted charter. Its words promise fair practice, but also lay down rules strict enough to make you sit up straighter. Historians still debate whether guilds protected quality for the public good or simply protected members' wallets. Probably both. Humans have always been able to mix noble ideals with self-interest. The hall's fireplace still has a faint warmth to it. You picture a winter's night here, a feast in progress. Long loaves of bread passed from hand to hand, mugs clinking, the air buzzing with news. In some cities, guild feasts could last for days, complete with singing competitions and the occasional drunken attempt to carve a roast while standing on a bench. The roast usually survived, the bench less often. Upstairs, you find the records room. Shelves hold ledgers bound in leather, the ink faded to a soft brown. Names, transactions, disputes, all neatly logged in looping handwriting. Here's an entry about a young apprentice fined for using too much blue dye. Here's another about a master carpenter who built a door so perfect the guild presented him with another door. The logic of this is lost to time, but it's comforting to imagine two men politely exchanging doorways. A side chamber holds tools displayed like relics. A tailor's shears big enough to scare a thief, a mason's mallet worn smooth, a baker's peel carved with initials. Each carries the ghost of a hand that knew it well. You run your fingers near the glass and think of the pride wrapped in each craft. Downstairs again, sunlight spills through the high windows, casting patterns on the flagstone floor. The hall is empty now, but you can still feel the hum of decisions made here. Prices agreed, disputes settled, apprentices welcomed, masters honored. You step outside into the street, blinking at the brightness, the noise of the city rushing back in. Behind you, the Guildhall stands quiet, holding its pride close, a silent witness to centuries of work, rivalry, and celebration. You walk on, your footsteps joining the soft chorus of a city that still remembers who built it, one careful hand at a time. You wander toward the edge of the old city, where the streets suddenly meet stone walls so high they seem to scrape the low clouds. At first they look silent and still, but as you approach, you start to sense a slow heartbeat. Centuries of footsteps, the clink of armor, the shouts of gatekeepers echoing in the gaps between towers. The wall is thick enough for 2 carts to pass on top. You find the narrow stair, worn concave from countless boots, and climb until the city drops away behind you. The wind is cooler up here, tasting faintly of the river beyond. Your shoes scuff along the walkway as you imagine the men and women who once paced this same route, watching for trouble, waving to friends down in the street, maybe sneaking a crust of bread on a quiet shift. Historians still debate whether city walls were more about defense or about prestige. Because let's be honest, nothing says we're important like a massive stone belt around your waist. But to those who lived inside, the wall was also a line between safety and the unknown. When the gates closed at dusk, the city became a sealed box, its people breathing the same air until morning. You pause by a lookout tower, its narrow slits framing the countryside like a moving painting. Fields golden with grain, a dark smudge of forest, the glint of a distant stream. The air smells cleaner here, touched by hay and smoke from scattered farmhouses. You lean out slightly, imagining the sudden rush of hooves on the road below, the urgent cry of a horn, and the scramble of guards to man their stations. Not every night was peaceful. A section of the wall dips toward the main gate. Below, heavy doors reinforced with iron studs stand ready to swing shut. Some gates had clever traps, zigzag entries to slow attackers, even a hidden pit or two. There's a story about one unlucky merchant who fell into such a pit not during a siege but after too much ale. He survived, but his dignity did not. Farther along, ivy grips the stone, weaving in and out like stitches in an endless green embroidery. You brush your fingers over it and feel the warmth where the sun has touched. A bird darts from the battlements, wheeling away toward the rooftops. You imagine carrying news this way, messages tied to small, fast wings. By the time you reach the far tower, the wind has picked up, tugging at your clothes, bringing with it the layered scents of the city. Bread, tallow, damp stone, and somewhere far off, the faintest whiff of the market spices. You stand there a moment longer, watching the gates begin to close for the night. The heavy groan of the hinges rolls up the wall like distant thunder. You turn back toward the stair, feeling the wall settle behind you, a giant exhaling. Down below, the streets curl inward again, drawing you back into the city's shelter. The wall keeps its watch, just as it has for centuries, breathing in the stories of those it protects. You follow the slope of the street until the buildings fall away, and there it is, the river. Wide and unhurried, it slides past the city like an old friend who's seen all your secrets but never tells. The morning light turns the surface into strips of silver and shadow, each ripple carrying a piece of the past. At the stone quay, the smell shifts, wet rope, fish, tar, and something sweet from the bakery upstream. You lean on the low wall, imagining the traffic that once crowded this very spot. Merchant barges piled with sacks of grain, fishing boats draped in nets, flat-bottomed ferries carrying people with more gossip than luggage. Water was the first highway. Before roads could promise much, rivers were already delivering everything from salt to songs. A boy runs past carrying a coil of rope twice his size, his bare feet slapping the planks. In another century, he might be hauling messages upriver to a mill or smuggling a letter in his pocket from one side of the city to the other. Historians still debate whether river trade shaped the city's identity more than its land routes, but here, with the current brushing by, it feels like the river had the final word. You walk along the bank, passing the fish market where today's catch gleams under woven mats to keep the sun off. A vendor calls out prices, his voice trained to carry over water and wind. Somewhere nearby, a cooper hammers a barrel ring into place, the clang traveling across the quay like a signal. Out on the water, a barge creaks as it shifts in the current. The crew, faces brown from sun and spray, move with the unspoken rhythm of those who trust the river's moods. One ties off a rope, another tosses scraps to gulls who wheel and complain overhead. A lone heron stands in the shallows, perfectly still, pretending not to care about human business. Past the docks, the river bends under an arched bridge. Its stones are worn smooth by centuries of carts and footsteps, yet it still holds fast. You cross slowly, pausing to watch the water slide beneath the arches. Somewhere down there, they say, are coins tossed for luck, anchors lost in storms, even a knight's helmet that slipped away during a festival boat race. Whether truth or legend, the river keeps them all. On the far side, a row of warehouses leans toward the water like tired old men. Their doors open wide to swallow crates, barrels, bales of wool. In the past, this was where the city's pulse could be measured by the sound of pulleys and the scent of spices drifting from freshly arrived cargo. You catch a trace now, pepper, maybe, or just the memory of it baked into the wood. As the afternoon light shifts, the river takes on a darker sheen, the reflections sharper. Boats turn toward the safety of the docks, ropes are looped, shutters closed. You linger on the bank as the current slides on, steady, patient, carrying away the day's stories to somewhere just out of sight. Evening has folded itself into the city, and with it comes a change in the air, a faint hum, a promise of something festive. You drift into a narrow lane where candlelight flickers against walls, the glow spilling from windows and lanterns hung high between buildings. The smell of roasted nuts and sweet wine floats past, carried on laughter that skips from one doorway to another. Tonight, the city is dressing itself in joy. You turn a corner and find the main street transformed. Streamers ripple overhead, painted masks grin from every stall, and musicians tune their instruments as if coaxing the night awake. In the Middle Ages, festivals weren't just about fun. They were the great equalizer. For a day or two, nobles and laborers mingled, rules loosened, and even the sternest guildmaster might dance in the street. Historians still debate whether these events were about genuine community spirit or simply a pressure valve for the year's frustrations. A drummer starts a steady beat, and a fiddler answers with a wild, lilting tune. Children dart between legs, waving paper lanterns shaped like animals, dragons, cranes, even a few lopsided sheep. Someone hands you a cup of spiced ale, the steam curling up to warm your face. It's sweeter than you expect, with a bite of ginger that makes your toes feel braver. You wander through the crowd, catching glimpses of performances. A juggler tossing apples into the air, a group of masked dancers moving in patterns older than memory, a storyteller holding an audience still with a tale of the city's founding. His voice dips low when he speaks of winter sieges and rises when he recalls the first spring market, as if he's conducting the listener's breath. Near the fountain, you watch two men in bright cloaks act out a playful duel, wooden swords clacking, each pretending to be more wounded than the last. They collapse in exaggerated defeat, and the crowd roars approval. Somewhere behind you, someone starts singing a drinking song, and by the second verse, half the square has joined in. You catch the scent of honey cakes and follow it to a baker's stall. The cakes are small, round, and dusted with something that glitters faintly in the lamplight. He tells you it's just sugar, but winks like he knows magic's involved. You bite into one and nearly hum out loud. The crisp shell gives way to warm, soft sweetness. As the night deepens, torches flare along the streets, casting gold and shadow in equal measure. The crowd moves like a slow tide, and you let yourself drift with it. A woman in a silver mask presses a sprig of rosemary into your hand for luck, then vanishes into the sea of color. Somewhere above, a bell strikes. Not a warning, just a reminder that even joy has an hourglass. You feel the mood soften, the music slowing, conversations dipping into whispers. The festival will end, but its echo will stay in the stones, waiting to wake again next year. You wake before the city does, drawn by the shadow of something tall against the paling sky. Following the slope of the street, you arrive at the watchtower. It rises from the wall like a stone candle, its narrow windows blinking at the dawn. The wooden door at its base groans as you push it open, and the smell of old dust and cold stone wraps around you like a cloak. Inside, the stair curls upward in a tight spiral. Each step is worn into the shape of countless boots, and your hand slides along a rope that feels older than most of the houses below. You climb slowly, imagining the guards who once made this same ascent, half asleep, lantern in one hand, spear in the other, trying not to trip on their own exhaustion. When you reach the top, the city unfurls beneath you. Roofs shingle out in waves, chimneys yawn smoke into the morning, and the market square lies empty, its stalls like folded wings. Beyond the walls, the fields catch the first light, and the river glints like a silver thread stitching the land together. Historians still debate whether such towers were more practical for spotting danger or symbolic for showing authority. Either way, they were lonely posts. A guard could spend hours here without seeing another soul, except perhaps a cat who might scale the roof just to keep you company. There's a note in an old ledger about a tower cat named Captain Whiskers, who was credited with scaring off a particularly bold raven. Whether or not that's true, the idea is oddly comforting. The wind up here is sharper, carrying smells from every corner of the city. Bread cooling in the bakery, hay from the stables, the faint tang of iron from the blacksmith's forge. You lean on the parapet and watch the gate open below, its hinges groaning like they're protesting the early hour. To the east, a column of smoke curls from a farmstead. To the west, the road disappears into mist. You imagine the watchman's eyes sweeping that horizon every few minutes, looking for the telltale flicker of armor, the churn of dust from hooves, or simply the postman trudging along, more tired than the soldiers ever were. Inside the tower's small chamber, you find a bench by a slit window. The stone here is warm from the rising sun, and you sit for a moment, letting the city's slow pulse reach you. The bells of the chapel begin to toll, their sound climbing up the tower and settling around you like a shawl. From up here, time feels stretched, the day unspooling in soft ribbons. You stand again, take one last sweep of the horizon, and start the slow spiral down. The tower door opens to the street, and the city greets you with the sound of footsteps, voices, and the first cart rumbling toward the square. The lonely watch is over. The day has begun. You turn off the main street and slip through a narrow wooden gate, half hidden behind a leaning wall. It creaks open into a courtyard, small, enclosed, a pocket of quiet that the city seems to have forgotten. The air here is different, softer, holding the scent of laundry drying on lines and a faint sweetness from a potted fig tree in the corner. Stone steps climb to balconies that wrap the upper floors, their railings tangled with ivy. In one corner, a bucket sits under a spout, catching a slow, steady drip from the roof. You can hear muffled voices from behind shutters, someone telling a story, someone laughing, the clink of crockery. Courtyards like this were the heartbeats of homes, where neighbors shared news, argued over noise, and sometimes passed down recipes the way other people passed down jewels. Historians still debate whether these shared spaces were more about necessity or community. In a city where land was precious, courtyards offered light, air, and just enough space for life to spill into the open. But they also acted like magnets, pulling people together whether they wanted it or not. You walk slowly along the flagstones, worn smooth by years of bare feet. A tabby cat sprawls across a sunny patch, lifting its head just enough to acknowledge your presence before returning to its nap. Somewhere above, a window opens and a matron leans out to shake a rug, sending a faint puff of dust into the morning. In the far corner, you notice an old well, its stones mottled with moss. A wooden bucket hangs from a frayed rope, and you imagine all the hands that must have gripped that handle over the years. Fetching water wasn't just a chore, it was a social ritual. People gathered here to trade the day's gossip before it had even reached the market. A door creaks, and an elderly man steps out, carrying a small stool. He sits in the patch of sun, nodding politely before beginning to peel apples with a small, wickedly sharp knife. The peel falls in one long red spiral, and he smiles to himself, as if he's remembering something from long ago. You linger near a corner where a climbing rose has pushed its way between stones, blooming defiantly. The petals are so soft they seem to steal light from the air. Somewhere overhead, laundry flaps like slow, lazy flags. Eventually, you slip back toward the gate. The courtyard behind you resumes its quiet rhythm, the drip into the bucket, the murmur of unseen voices, the occasional clatter from a kitchen. Life here is both hidden and open, private yet shared. As the gate swings shut, you realize you've just stepped out of one world and back into another, both equally part of the city's pulse. You follow a quiet lane to a heavy oak door set into the wall of an old stone building. When you push it open, the air changes, cool, dry, and tinged with the faint scent of beeswax and old parchment. Inside, candles burn low, their light pooling over wooden desks where rows of books and scrolls rest like sleeping animals. You've stepped into the scriptorium. The room is hushed except for the scratch of quills. A robed scribe bends over a sheet of vellum, his head tilted just so, eyes fixed on the precise curve of each letter. Ink glistens wetly in the flicker of the candle before sinking into the page. The benches here have grooves worn deep where elbows leaned for hours, and the air is warm with the shared focus of people who work in silence. Historians still debate whether scriptoria like this were more centers of learning or of preservation. Were they actively shaping ideas, or simply holding on to what might otherwise be lost? Either way, each letter feels like a small act of defiance against forgetting. You pass a table where pigments are being ground. The smell of crushed minerals mingles with the faint tang of egg yolk used for illumination. Red from cinnabar, blue from lapis lazuli, green from malachite, colors that had to travel as far as spices, carried in small packets worth their weight in silver. The apprentice grinding them hums under his breath, his rhythm keeping time with the slow wheel of the mortar. Along one wall, shelves are stacked with finished volumes, some bound in leather, others stitched in plain cloth, their pages heavy and slightly warped from the damp of past winters. You run a finger along the spine of one, feeling the indentations of tooling. Inside, the letters march in neat rows, and in the margins, a tiny doodle of a rabbit chases a dog, proof that even centuries ago, someone's mind wandered. At the far desk, a scribe pauses to warm his hands over a brazier. The heat carries the smell of charcoal, mingling with the faint resin of the ink. He looks out the narrow window to the city beyond, but the sound of the streets barely reaches here. Outside, markets open, bells ring, carts roll. But in this room, time folds in on itself. You take a seat at an empty desk, running your hand over its scarred surface. In the quiet, you hear your own breath, the turning of pages, the soft clink of a metal penknife trimming a quill. Here, every mark is deliberate, every word intended to outlast the one who writes it. When you step back out into the daylight, the noise of the street feels almost too loud. The scriptorium door closes behind you with a soft click, sealing away its slow, patient work until the next hand picks up a pen. The afternoon has ripened into that golden hour when the city feels both awake and ready to rest. You wander toward the central square, drawn by the deep, resonant hum of the great bell. It hangs in a stone tower that rises above the rooftops, the copper surface burnished by centuries of air and touch. The tower door stands open, and you climb the steps, each one worn smooth in the middle. Halfway up, the sound grows richer, filling the stairwell with a slow vibration that settles into your bones. When you emerge onto the platform, the whole city lies below. Streets curling like ribbons, rooftops glowing in the sinking sun, the river catching light in scattered shards. The bell's frame is massive, timbers darkened with age. You run your fingers along the wood, feeling the warmth left by the day. Bells like this once marked everything: hours, curfews, festivals, even warnings. Historians still debate whether they were more a tool for civic order or for spiritual rhythm. But to anyone who lived within earshot, their voice was part of life itself. As the clapper swings, the first tone rolls out, low, steady, almost too deep to be heard so much as felt. The city pauses for a breath. In the streets below, people lift their heads, merchants rest their hands, children stop mid-game. The sound gathers them in, just as it has gathered countless others over centuries. You lean on the parapet, watching long shadows stretch across the cobbles. A baker pulls down his awning. A woman calls her children in from the steps. Somewhere, a cat jumps from one balcony to another, unimpressed by the day's grand ending. The bell tolls again, slower now, as though savoring the evening. From this height, you can almost imagine all the other endings this city has seen. Bells rung for victories, for losses, for royal visits, for the first market after a hard winter. Perhaps the most remarkable thing is how the sound remains the same, rolling across roofs and into courtyards, threading through alleys, touching every corner without changing its tune. When the final note fades, the air feels softer. The sun slides behind the far hills, and a cool breeze curls up to meet you. You take one last look at the streets below, now settling into lamplight, and begin the slow walk down. At the tower's base, the square is quieter, the day folded neatly away. Somewhere nearby, someone hums a tune from the festival, and the smell of fresh bread drifts from an unseen doorway. The city exhales, its pulse steady, ready for another night and another tomorrow. You step onto the cobbles once more, the stones cool underfoot, the bell's echo lingers in your chest, a reminder that here, endings are never truly endings, only the start of another chapter in the city's long, unbroken story.